Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to iTTV. In our lesson today, we'll be speaking to you more about the concept of line and angles. Well, boys and girls, what do you mean by line and angles, and how is the application? Let's look into our subject matter. If two corresponding angles are equal, then the two lines are parallel. Conversely, if two alternate angles are equal, then the two lines are parallel. If two interior angles are supplementary, then the two lines are parallel. Let's look into example. What can be said of the lines AX and BY in the following diagrams? If we look into the diagram, we have line AX and line BY. We have an angle 48 degrees on both sides. Now, since angle AXZ and angle BWZ are corresponding angles and they are equal, AX and BY are therefore parallel lines.
Well, boys and girls, if you look into our first question for today, the question wants us to see whether line AX and BY are parallel or not. So how do we determine whether line AX and BY are parallel? If you look into the diagram, we have been given 48 degrees on this side and on this side. So to determine whether AX and BY are parallel, we have to bring back our issues of corresponding angles, alternate angles and interior angles to play. If you look into 48 and 48 here, I've written here on the board that angle AXZ, that is this angle, equals to angle BWZ, angle BWZ. Now, when you look closer, this angle forms a corresponding angle. If you remember, the corresponding angle, the alphabet that we used was letter F. This is how the F looks like. Therefore, in conclusion, we can say that line AX and line BY, line AX and line BY are therefore parallel lines. It is that simple, students. Let's turn to the second question. What can be said of the lines AX and BY in the following diagrams? Since angle AKZ and angle WLY are alternate angles and they are equal, therefore, line AX and BY are parallel lines. Well, boys and girls, when we look into the next question, they are requiring us to answer whether line AX and BY are parallel or not. When you look on closer examination, we find the angle 57 on this side and on this side. Now, I've written on the board here, angle AKZ. Where is angle AKZ? Angle AKZ, that is AKZ. This is the angle we are talking about. Since angle AKZ is equals to angle WLY, WLY, this is the angle. Now, if you look into these two angles, they form an alternate angles. How is it alternate angles? Well, if you remember, alternate angle looks like a Z shape. So therefore, we can say that AX and BY are parallel lines. Because I can establish that these two angles are alternate angles, therefore these two lines AX and BY will become parallel lines. I hope you have understood what I've said to you just now. Let us turn to question 3. Determine whether the lines AB and PQ are parallel in the following diagrams. Well, let's look into this question. The question wants us to ask whether line AB and PQ are parallel or not. If you look into the angles given, we have been given 68 degrees at the top and 112 at the bottom. Now, on closer observation, what we can deduce here is, we know that AB is a straight line. Now, on a straight line, the sums of angle on a straight line would be 180 degrees. Therefore, what we can do here is, we can find the value here, because PN downwards is also a straight line. Now, the answer to this level here would be 180 degrees less 112, we will obtain 68 degrees. Now, once we have obtained 68 degrees, we compare this with the other side, we have another 68 degrees. Therefore, angle A and P, this angle is equivalent to angle NPQ, angle NPQ to this angle. Now, what we can do here is, we can draw a line like this, and we call this the alternate angles. So therefore, angle ANP and NPQ are alternate angles, and therefore line AB and PQ are parallel lines. So therefore, if you look into different questions, different type of angles can come about. It is up to you to use your good vision to determine what kind of angles we are talking about. Having established the type of angles, then we can establish whether that lines are parallel or not. Determine whether lines AB and PQ are parallel in the following diagram. Well, boys and girls, in this question, we are also required to find whether line AB and PQ is parallel or not. Now, when you look into this diagram, it looks a bit more difficult to understand, because we have a 62 here, we have a 15 the other side, and we have a 77. In order for us to see whether line AB and PQ are parallel, what you need to do here is, we got to draw a dotted line on the 77. This is what you should do in your exam. I just draw a dotted line on the 77. Now, these dotted lines you have to create in your examination. Now, why did I draw these dotted lines? Now, if you look very closely, since I've drawn this line, okay, let me label them. Let me say this to be C and D. So we have to draw this dotted line, and we can label them as C and D. Now, since this line is also so-called parallel to AB and PQ, therefore we have to employ the concepts. Let's look into the first concept. How is 15 related to this portion of this angle? If you look closely, I can say that angle 15 is forming an alternate angle. 15 on this side, 15 on this side. What about 62? 62 likewise also forms an alternate angle on this side. 62 on this side, 62 on this side. So what do you see? 62 add up to 15, we get a 77. It is just that neat. Okay? Therefore, since angle 62 and 15 are alternate angles, therefore line AB and line PQ are parallel. So in your exam, if you see such questions, what you need to do here is, we got to draw or extend a dotted line across, and then we have to see whether these numbers here are alternate respectively. Once having established this, then you can conclude that both line AB and PQ are parallel. Let's look into the next question. Determine whether lines AB and PQ are parallel in the following diagram. Well, boys and girls, looking into this question, if you look on closer examination, we find that these angles, both angles, 121 degrees and 59 degrees, is some sort located in a squared U form. If you remember in our earlier lessons, I did mention to you the squared U. This squared U represents the interior angles. Let us see whether the interior angle adds up to 180. That is the condition. Now, since 121 and 59 gives you 180, therefore, this forms an interior angle. Since this is an interior angle, therefore, line AB and line PQ are parallel. So this question involves interior angles. Other questions may involve alternate angles and corresponding angles. Let's now turn to the next question. Determine whether the lines AB and PQ are parallel in the following diagram. Well, boys and girls, in this question, like the other questions, we need to determine whether line AB and PQ are parallel or not. If you look at the numbers given here, we have a 56 degree, 32 degrees and an 88 degrees. On closer observation, if you add up these two values, since 56 at 32 gives you 88, therefore this whole value is 88. So what can we say about these two 88 values? On closer scrutiny, we can say that these two angles are corresponding angles. How do I determine whether it's a corresponding angles? If you remember in our earlier lessons, I did mention to you corresponding angles will carry the letter F. How am I going to draw the letter F? This is how. We have a straight line down and we have a line across this way. So this represents the F and this would be the corresponding angles. Therefore, line AB and PQ are parallel in nature. It is that easy for us to determine. Let's now turn our attention to the next question. Determine whether lines AB and PQ are parallel in the following diagram. Well, boys and girls, if you look into this question, we have diagram ABPQ, which looks like a quadrilateral. The question wants us to determine whether line AB is parallel to PQ. How are we going to determine the issue here? In order for us to answer this question, let's observe the values given. On one end, we are given 108. The other end, we are given 72 degrees. On closer observation, you note that this question, like the earlier question, forms a squared U shape. This is how it is formed. We have this line and this line downwards on both ends. If you look at this squared U shape, the concept that we are dealing here with is interior angle issues. And in interior angle issues, we know that the sum of interior angles should give you 180 degrees. So on closer observation, we know that since 108 plus 72 degrees, we obtain 180 degrees. So the equation is correct. Therefore, we can conclude that these two angles form the interior angles. Once we have established that this is an interior angle, therefore we can conclude that AB, line AB is parallel to line PQ. So therefore, boys and girls, line AB and line PQ is parallel. This is how we will attempt questions dealing with parallel lines in your examination. There are a few things that I like to talk about under this topic, particularly parallel lines. In the school, many students are afraid to attempt questions dealing with parallel lines simply because, firstly, they do not understand how parallel lines are formed. Secondly, they are not too sure what type of angles they are talking about. Not to worry, I'm going to give you an insight or summary to what is important in your examination. When you get a question in your examination, the first thing to look out for is whether there are any issues of parallel lines. That is the first attempt that you have to look into. If there are no parallel lines issue, then you can just forget about it. In the event there are parallel line issues, the next question that you have to look into is whether can I form one of these three angles. What are those angles? I've mentioned this in our earlier lessons, those angles being alternate angles, corresponding angles, and interior angles. That is the second step. The third step to determine is what are the shapes of these angles. I've given you a breakdown on the alphabets for their respective angles. If you remember, alternate angles carry the letter Z, interior angles carry the letter squarish U, and corresponding angles will carry the letter F. So it is up to you, being prudent and wise, to find whether we can find these letters in that particular question. Can we observe the letter Z? Can we see the letter F? Or can we identify the letter U? Only having identified one of these three letters can you go on to the next step. The next step would be in solving the question. Now, when I talk about these steps, the most important part the students are going to have problem would be in identifying that particular angle itself. Now, in order for us to overcome the fear or in order for us to see the angles, more practices need to be done. So it would be wise for you students to look into your books and do as much question as possible, because in your exams there could be various and numerous types of questions like the one on the board here. We have quadrilateral given and an interior angle given. This is a very easy question. Of course, there are many more tougher questions to attempt. So therefore, students, it is important for you to take note of all these important issues that I've mentioned to you, particularly in establishing parallel lines, in identifying the angles. Sometimes in your angles questions, they may give you angles and they may ask you whether those lines are parallel in nature. Like in today's lessons, I've mentioned to you, in order for us to establish whether those lines are parallels, concepts of corresponding angles, interior angles, and alternating angles must come into play. If you have understood the lesson today, then I'm very sure you would be attempting this question successfully. I hope you have understood what I've taught you thus far. I hope to see you in the next coming lesson. Until then, good day from me.